And that's on page 91, or starts on page 91. Members, I want to distribute some recommendations that I have booked up with, and thank you, Councillor Linda Cooper. Councillor Cooper will move them and I will second them.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah. And, oh, sorry, I just need to take Councillor Hills first.
Yes, so, sorry, Mr. Chair, it has been anonymously suggested that I might have a non-financial interest to this item because of a post on social media, and under Standing Order 1.3.8, the final decision on whether the interest is a conflict rests with me. As a leader of one of the leaders in the Auckland Council, I would like to ensure complete robustness in our decision-making processes and that we act in a way that is clear and transparent. To preserve openness and fairness in the debate, I've decided that despite never having voted on this item as a local board member or a councillor last term or this term, I would prefer that that accusation causes me to step out of, I'll stay in the room, but I won't participate in the item at all. Okay.
So we'll record a declaration of interest on this item. Is that what your request is?
Yeah, non-financial.
Okay, thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
The point of, can you identify what the point of order is?
I'm just concerned about the addition of B.
We haven't got there. We haven't got there, so just hold, please. The staff have come up, and I'm going to go to Councillor Cooper.
Actually, would you? I think
probably the staff,
yeah.
And then Councillor Cooper. But it is moved Councillor Cooper, seconded by myself, and then there is a hard copy being distributed to the members.
And then, Mr. Chair, just when you're ready, I did raise a point of order.
Okay, what is the point of order, though?
My point of order is around what you're moving.
It's moved and seconded.
We've got A in the agenda. So are you proposing to bolt B onto that when I would have thought that was an amendment?
No, it's a chair's recommendation, which he's allowed to do.
Excuse me. There is nothing moved until someone moves it. Every recommendation in here is only a recommendation. It is not a moved motion until it is moved. And if something different comes before the meeting and is moved, then that is the motion. And it's not a resolution until it's carried. So there are recommendations, motions, resolutions. And this is now a motion before us. But I will come, we've got legal with us as well, and we've made some checks there. But I'll go to Clive Fewer from Panuku to introduce, Megan first from Auckland Council, from Strategy Unit.
Point of order, Mr.
And then we'll go to Panuku, and then we'll go to Councillor Cooper, and I have a point of order.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure it's a point of order or a point of clarification. Can I seek your clarification on this, Mr. Chair? It is B, it's not Chair's recommendation, I understand it's B. It's been moved, and I'm trying to process this as quickly as I can, but this establishes it appears to establish some new processes, independent experts, etc., a greater Takapuna reference group. There's nothing in here that actually notes the role or the engagement specifically with the Devonport Takapuna Local Board. And I'm wondering where do they sit in this document of these resolutions?
So we haven't actually, we're going to take Megan, we're going to take Panuku, and then we'll take some questions once we've had the introductions.
Okay, could you just respond to that, please?
Yes, thank you. Megan.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, councillors. This is just a very quick reminder of process. Then Clive will speak from Panuku's perspective, and then Councillor Cooper is the chair of the hearings panel on this matter. So it was in March 2016 when the Equivalent Committee approved the Takapuna High Level Project Plan. And there are a number of actions and options put up as part of that plan, and one of those was to sell a number of sites in order to regenerate the area. And one of those sites is the site you're looking at today, which is 40 Anzac Street. So between 2016 and now, there's been a lot of work done by the Panuku team that have led that with community, local board and this council around the Takapuna high-level plan. And in August this year, submissions were open on the proposition to change the use on the site of 40 Anzac Street from a car park to a mixed use, so opportunity to do more than just parking, which would regenerate the area. The hearing was held in October, and as you heard, the Regulatory Committee set a hearing panel up that was chaired by Councillor Cooper, and the hearing and submissions were held and heard in October. And so what you have in attachment 1 to this, the short memo in front of you, is the report of the hearings panel. So that is Councillor Cooper, that is, as chair, that is her report as to the findings and recommendations of the hearings panel. The decision before you today as a planning committee is to approve that change of use of 40 Anzac Street. If you, and you can see that that is as per recommendation A. If you don't do that, i.e. if you don't think that the change should be made at all, then the process would need to start again. You need to go through another process, or you just wouldn't do anything about it at all. But the decision and the recommendation here is to approve that change of recommendation, and there are a number of steps that are going to come probably over the next year or so, and you can see some of those reflected both in the hearing report and also some recommendations B in front of you. So they are about the next steps post the decision to change the use on this site. I'll just hand over to Clive now, who'll do a bit of an intro from Panuku's perspective, and then Councillor Cooper will speak as the chair of the hearing panel.
Thank you, Megan. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, councillors. I think this is the culmination, or this is a critical step, I suppose, a statutory process step in a journey that actually started, that you started, I suppose your predecessor started back in the middle of 2015, when in creating Panuku, you identified a whole number of commercial centres where there was an opportunity, because of council's land holdings, to better achieve the objectives of the unitary plan, and in particular across all of the areas, particularly to achieve more housing. Takapuna probably is facing more residential growth than any other centre on the North Shore. And the inherent opportunity, which was in the high-level project plan that was, as I say, agreed back in March 16, was that to make it a successful place, a successful place to live and work, you had to balance, if you like, the use of the council land in the centre with the inevitable growth in population around the centre. And so the whole process Panuku's been working on is, how do we create, if you like, what are the steps to creating a more vibrant, focused town centre that could maybe bring in some of the community uses to make it an attractive place to be the heart of the enlarged Takapuna. And that work's included looking at how we can accommodate, working closely with Auckland Transport, how we can also accommodate car parking, and creating the flexibility to make the combination of the Hurstmere Road space, the land we also that the council owns, that Panuku's added to between Hurstmere Road and the central car park, as well as the 40 Anzac site, a place which can be the focus for making Takapuna more attractive and more engaged with its community. So today isn't about design, because of the way the land was bought, because it was bought on a separate rate, there has to be a special consultation process, and that's what we've been through. So in essence, the main issue today is simply to receive the report of the recommendations of the hearings panel under that statutory process about the change of use. The very significant process that's still ahead of us is, if the change of use is confirmed, how do we then use that land to deliver an outcome that the council, the local board, the community can all embrace and be proud of? Now, that's a considerable piece of work, and that's all in front of us. That's coming. But you can't get to that if there's not the change of use. So this is an important gateway decision, which is a statutory process decision, which then, if you go through that gate, then it's possible to have the meaningful engagement in terms of how the land may be used. Now, one of the councillors mentioned the Takapuna Reference Group. That was a group set up by a previous local board. And it was interesting, in over 9 months of work, there was almost unanimity amongst that group in terms of the type of development that would be good for Takapuna. And it was around, certainly it wasn't around keeping a large asphalt car park in the centre of the town centre. So it was around better utilisation of the land, better linkages, and moving out of, if you like, the 20th century car-dominated environment. So I think the hearings panel, heard the extensive submissions and has supported the change of use. We've got the ability, and it's referred to, I suppose, in the hearings panel resolution, that the ability to develop alternative car parking has been agreed with the AT board, and that can be triggered, and if this resolution is agreed and we're moving down this path. So the next step, if you agree today, is to really embark on what should be a very exciting engagement process around design and community involvement to say, and I think it's covered in the Chair's recommendations, to come back to you with the proposed recommendations on how an improved environment can be delivered there. So this is not, agreeing this today isn't committing to anything. It's not committing to a sale. It's not committing it's committing to nothing more than doing meaningful work to come back with some possibilities that you may wish to contemplate. So I think that's, Mr. Chairman, I think that's the main thing. I know there were a lot of questions from this morning that still have to be dealt with, and we're happy to deal with those.
Thank you. Just for clarification, the recommendations that you see in red are the recommendations of Councillor Cooper and myself. They're joint recommendations from the Chair of the Hearings Panel and myself as Chair of this committee. And thank you, Councillor Newman. There was something that didn't show up in the draft, and the Roman 8 includes inclusion of the local board. Thank you for pointing that out. It should have been there. I will now go to Councillor Cooper to introduce her hearings report.
All right, thank you, Chairman. And I know I'm not speaking into a very friendly room at this point, but I want to just reiterate that we went through a process that was required. There were only 3 councillors available to do this. And an IMSB member, Mr Wilcox, Councillor Stewart and Councillor Clow. We undertook this, and it probably will answer Councillor Lee's earlier question about why weren't independent commissioners required for this. This is a special consultative procedure under Section 83 of the Local Government Act, which requires governing body members or councillors in other parts of the country to hear these. It is not an RMA hearing, so that's why we don't use RMA commissioners. So none of those RMA requirements apply here. So yes, I guess you've seen the report, you've seen our recommendation, and I just want to note that in A's bullet point 4, I do take on what the local board chair has said. I think what we did mean to say was the whole area, but we were so focused on the public space part of it, because a huge number of people that came to see us, even though about 148 people said they wanted to speak, only 33 people turned up, but it was good to hear them all. We had the hearings over 2 days, and then another submitter couldn't come on those 2 days, so we made allowance for them to speak just before the deliberations, and we deliberated in public. One of the overwhelming things we heard was about the real desire to have public open space here. You know, to really develop a heart, like a real heart, rather than just some concrete with lines on it, or tar seal with lines on it. And that's what, because it was actually quite difficult in terms of people's desire for car parking. But we were reassured by the building of the gasometer site. Another issue people are very concerned about was losing the market. Currently, the market's there just really there. It's not the right purpose for the car park. It should only be used as a car park. That is why we're having to change the use. And so it's really there just because AT allows it to be there on a month by month. So if they wanted to change and use it for car park and not have them there, they could do that too. So we also saw that the ability to have a proper open public space where we could have events, there could be events, there would then be that place that the market knew it could have every Sunday. So that was really trying to cement that rather than take the market away, because at the moment it's a bit tenuous. Now something... so in the end, we did decide to change the use, and not because we wanted to take car parking away or any of those things. What we wanted to do was give the community the ability to have something in that space other than a car park, because currently you can't have anything else. That's it. And so what we looked at was that holistic picture of the future, what the public were wanting, and unless the use is changed, it will stay as a car park. So that really tipped us over into recommending change of use today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. First, members will take questions, even though it is moved. If we can take the questions before statements. Councillor Lee, I carried your question over to the item. Did you want to raise that, and do you recall what that question was?
I just answered it in the...
She has. Councillor Cooper has made
nothing further to it.
A response. Given the sensitivity of the matter, the political sensitivity of the matter, I think there needs to be some concern about. I think process has been brought up, I think, by Councillor Cooper, but I think in terms of acting, if you like, as a judge in this matter, and then acting as a political actor in this decision, may not necessarily be a good look to the community, given that there's a lot of division and a lot of feeling around this privatisation matter. So that's my concern.
Okay, thank you. So, just on the process, I went to Clive. This is a question for you, or Kate, or Carlos. I went to one of the consultation evenings at the boating club, and it was raised there, where is the design? Can you just, and then there were others who said, how dare you show any design? Can you just again remind the members of this process as opposed to other processes that are yet to be undertaken?
Yeah, I think Panuku was always aware that there was going to be some polarisation of views around a change of use of the car park, and that isn't all. It's not just about a love of the car park, as you've heard. It's about people that suggest there's privatisation or a sale of council assets, or that. But equally, there's been strong, as I say, very strong presentations to our board from the petitioners for open space in the area, and so there's a variety of strong but conflicting views in terms of what might be best for the area. Panuku, so North Shore also had acquired some property on Hurstmere Road, and Panuku added to that last year and bought a property at 30 Hurstmere Road. And so there's an opportunity, there's some very exciting opportunities in Takapuna to better link Hurstmere Road to create the town square for events and focus that the centre wants. and to take that and better link across what's currently the car park towards Potters Park. There's opportunities that are possible to better bring some local community facilities into the area. I know that you're aware. I think the council's rationalising its own accommodation needs within the region, and that will lead to changes in Takapuna. So there's again opportunities to focus things there to create that strong community and administrative heart as well. There are a number of options. There's a lot of work to tease those out, and I think the Panuku decision was it was premature to do any extensive or expensive design work if there wasn't a clear mandate. So it was very much seen that we needed the mandate through the statutory engagement, the statutory consultation process, the special consultation process, and to be clear that, although you've reaffirmed, you made an agreement, you agreed back in in March 16 that Panuku could progress the sale and development of this land, but it still needs the this statutory process to be completed. And in fact, the thinking that certainly emerged from the hearings panel and is captured in here is that the majority of that site is clearly intended to stay in council ownership as well, through the provision of public space. So I think there's a lot of issues, and I think there's an opportunity to really explore a number of ways in which urban design could treat the council-owned land. And I think that's all in front. So it was just seen that wasn't an appropriate investment until there was a green light to actually proceed with it.
Okay, thank you, Clive. Member Tohanare.
Kia ora. Look, just a couple of questions. As happens in these circumstances, rumours start to fly around. Can you give a categorical yes or no that Panuku hasn't lined up somebody to buy this property?
Categorically, it hasn't.
Cool. That's awesome. The second question is wouldn't you normally put forward a proposed plan and then seek the changes? Or is it the other way around? I'm not sure. I'm a bit dumb on this. These issues. You know, if you want to do something, wouldn't you put up a plan and then ask to change the designation or the use?
Yeah, the particular process step that this meeting you've received the report about is say confirming the change of use, and without that change of use, we can't proceed to do anything on the site. So until we saw the terms of that approval, it was yes, it was possible to do it another way around. We could have spent money and time and developed a lot of design options and come up with preferred options, but if it never crossed this step here, that would have all have been wasted. So over the last 6 or 7 years, I mean, certainly North Shore City carried out some extensive work on, I think, John, you may have been part of an author of it in your past life, authored some quite comprehensive plan for developing central Takapuna. The local board have also circulated material in the community about possibilities for developing the site. And ironically, it's the scale of some of those opportunities that some people have been nervous about. But in fact, I think time has passed, and I think there's quite a strong feeling. I know our board, when it met the petitioners, was clearly left with the impression that any solution for this site should include a significant amount of public open space. So look, I think that's, I think that's all. That's, as I say, the significant work that's in front of us, really, to fine tune that. There's other potential purchase opportunities which might give other better opportunities to create superior solutions. Look, there's a lot of there's a number of moving parts that I think just need time and care to work through.
Can you just the last little one, Mr. Chair? Can you given Auckland's lack of housing or lack of housing opportunities? has there been any thought given to whatever plans that may come in the future for this parcel of land? Will they include apartments?
Yeah. Look, it's certainly possible, but I think I'd maybe answer it a slightly different way. I think when the unitary plan was adopted, what it did was significantly increase the ability for land to be developed to greater heights within Takapuna. So on Hurstmere Road, there are a number of schemes around at the moment where people are looking at 6, 7-storey residential apartment blocks. So Takapuna, irrespective of whatever happens in this decision today, Takapuna is going to see increased development, and it's going to be higher development. But if you want that to continue to grow and for Takapuna to be an attractive place for the very development that I think you're all trying to encourage to provide more homes, then it would be good if that's matched by an attractive centre that complements that it's a place when the people who are living in the apartments that are built on private land by private people could still come out and maybe sit in public open space and do whatever they want to do. And so I think that's the balance. It's the city building, it's the place building, and it's a combination of using our land wisely, recognising what is effectively desired and is being triggered by the unitary plan.
Just one small one, Mr. Chair. Sorry. Whose land is it? Is it Panuku's or is it
council's?
Council's. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I understand taking questions at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So three questions, and I'm just hoping these questions might be helpful for you as the mover of those recommendations now into that motion, Mr. Chair. And the first question is just around item number 6, where it reads, recommends that Panuku re-establishes the Greater Takapuna Reference Group. Just listening to the officer's briefing just now, I wonder if that wording should not be recommends that the Devonport Takapuna Local Board re-establishes that group, because my understanding was they ran that group rather than Panuku. So just checking on that wording, Mr. Chair, that's, I guess, question number 1.
I'm happy for Clive to answer that, but the Takapuna, Greater Takapuna Reference Group did report to the board in February or April, Clive? Kate?
February. They did a workshop in December, I believe, and then reported to the business meeting in February.
Yeah, the motion actually says that or similar. The board resolved that that reference group not advise Panuku at that time. So that is not very helpful, members. That was by resolution. We want an engagement group to advise the wider council family, including this committee, including Panuku and whoever. But the board resolved, and the resolution's there, that it not report to Panuku, only report to the board. And I'm suggesting, members, that we need a consultation group. If it is a genuine community engagement group, it needs to be able to speak and be heard more widely.
Second question. Thank you. Second question was, if you wanted to add a point number 9, Mr. Chair, around, we've heard a lot about the parking and opportunities potentially to go underground, and there's been some numbers just bandied around off the top of people's head. I wonder if it's appropriate to add in a clause there to actually have a feasibility report done or something along those lines, so we've got some evidential, factual figures to look at in terms of what that build might actually cost as an option, particularly listening to the submissions today from the local board, if you felt that's appropriate. So that was question number 2, Mr. Chair. I'll just leave that rest with you.
Thank you. Clive, on the question around underground car parking, there's been a strategy that's been undertaken by Auckland Transport.
Yeah, look, as a rule of thumb, it's twice the cost of putting cars above ground. So it's roughly $100,000 a car park. And the problem with the 40 Anzac site is in irregular shape. You'd be excavating close to a road and to the Rose Garden and to the public transport area. It's an inefficient shape, and if you want to put a large number of cars there, you're probably going to 3 levels. It's probably a level of complexity you simply wouldn't consider as value for money. You've still got the ability to add the Bruce Mason, the car park in Killarney Street, which was built for the Bruce Mason Theatre, which was actually built out of the car park reserve funds, has got the ability to add 2 more levels. And so for a fraction of the cost of building underground cars, you can increase off-street parking there. But that's in the context that AT isn't sure that we need to increase off-street car parking to any great degree. And that's really because it's a slight dichotomy in the sense that because the inefficiency of the car parking, that people spend a lot of time driving around looking for car parks, and AT see a lot of efficiencies from having clearly signposted cars on the periphery of the area where people can find them easily and park with ease. And it's, and that's been, so there's a whole history of, I think, of just trying to help Takapuna work more effectively by allowing the car park to operate more efficiently.
Just to support the meeting, Clive, can you tell us where, for the members that aren't familiar, where the Gosomatus car parking site is and the Killarney site, and approximately how many metres users would have to walk?
Yeah. Well, the first thing to note is the council control, or Auckland Transport, manage something like 2,200 off-street car parks in central Takapuna. So it has a lot of car parking. So the plan is to build 400 to 500 cars, and it'll come down to sort of get the construction estimates. 400 to 500 cars on the Gosomatus Street, which is between Northcroft and Huron Streets, which is it's approximately 150 metres from the end of Hurstmere Road. So it's sort of the distance from probably here to and then the Killarney Street car park, which is at the northern end of Takapuna, is a similar distance from the other end of Hurstmere Road. So both car parks allow people to come to the centre, park on the periphery, and then move into the centre, which allows the centre to have, say, ultimately be more pedestrian friendly.
Councillor Sayers, you had a third question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I hope this was a helpful question. Maybe depending on the answer, you might want to add in another point, but it's around understand from Panuku how, if you can just fully elaborate, how you would get full engagement from the community and the local board prior to any sale actually going through. And because my concern around it, Mr. Chair, is that once the sale's done, there's an inability perhaps have things added to the contract or specific terms or outcomes.
That's a good question. Look, I think the first thing is to emphasise a sale, whether any sale eventuates, comes down to exactly what's agreed in terms of how the site's developed. If a significant portion of the site is retained as public open space, then clearly that won't be sold. So the question is, are there other parts of the site that potentially could be sold, which will help bear the cost of forming, because if you want attractive space, that comes at a cost. We know that, so we know that there's a lot of pressure on the LTP to fund infrastructure. So if you want high quality public realm, the potential is to sale in a part of the site might give you the reinvestment funds that are capable to deliver the high quality public realm that I think the community would want. So that process to progress sale would only come after there was a clear sense of what the overall design objectives were, and probably balanced with how the public realm was going to be delivered, and it would emerge out of a longer process. And of course, any sale needs appropriate market conditions as well. And it might be that any sale of land could be some time off.
I guess my question was probably, thank you for your answer, but I think my question is just a little bit more angled around the engagement processes there.
Oh, the engagement process. Yeah. So I think in an area like Takapuna, what some of the conversations we've had about whether it would be worth, it's worth a significant effort. This is a piece of, if you like, city building of quite significance. It could lend itself well to design competitions. We've got we've got some empty retail space adjacent to the site where we were looking to set it up as a permanent drop-in consultation process where people will meet designers, give feedback. Look, I think it's something that needs, a high level. I mean, I think a level of engagement that we all want to be proud of in terms of how it's done and how the community are engaged. And I think it's trying to do something that sets a benchmark in terms of high quality of community involvement and high quality designers that deliver a superior outcome. I mean, I think it's ideal in a way to. I think, and there are a number of ways in which the puzzle could be solved. So I think getting maybe some different design perspectives, bringing together solutions, allowing the community to feed into that, to allow that to be workshopped with you and the local board, is the way we'll get to some of those high quality outcomes.
Well, just listening to those answers, Mr. Chair, I just wonder if that's captured well enough in the current wording, or if you might want to think about trying to capture that in some way.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I want to go back to Councillor Cooper because she was the chair of the hearings, and I'm allowing you a point of clarification on councillors. Something you wanted to raise, Councillor Cooper?
It was a question. And I just didn't know I wasn't quite sure around Councillor Lee's comments, but given that I wasn't eligible to vote, I guess if there's any question of that, I'd like a ruling on that. But the actual process specifically allows for me and the panel to report back to the meeting, put a recommendation, be part of the discussion. So I'm not quite. I don't see that I wouldn't be able to vote, but it would be. I don't want to have that hanging over me as if I'm being unscrupulous.
Question. Thank you. We often have commissioners that from this table go out and undertake hearings and come back and participate.
All sorts.
We've had legal advice on that before, I think on a few times. Megan, my understanding is that is entirely permissible.
Yes, I'm just checking. Yep, that's absolutely fine. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, answered.
Thank you. And just a question of Clive that I didn't ask in the hearings, or Kate, or Carlos. In terms of currently in Takapuna, someone can pretty much build, as of right, quite a high rise that's not notified. And so, but in Panuku's developments usually, is it right we often have developer agreements when we sell, and we'll say, okay, we'll sell it to you, but we'd like you to meet these requirements because we're a council and we want certain outcomes. Is that often how it works with Panuku?
Yeah.
As opposed to a private developer, which can just flip up next to your house?
Yeah, no, I think it's as if Panuku, as representing council as landowner, can mandate and control the form of development.
Yeah, so that's,
so if, for example, we wanted low-rise development, and that's what we would ensure is delivered.
Yeah, I asked that, Mr. Chairman, because I think there is a fear that something will just spring up without any say-so, where we do have developer agreements, and I think that's really critical here. That nothing is just going to spring up if we do sell land. Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I've got three specific questions, two to Panuku and one to you, Megan. So to Panuku, Clive, first, did I hear you correctly when you said if we vote for a change of use on this site, that doesn't mean there will be a sale? So not necessarily change of use doesn't mean there will be a sale. And did I also hear you correctly when you said if we voted for change of use, it would not necessarily mean removal of the current number of car parks? I thought you said at the very beginning, no sale, no removal of current number of car parks.
I think probably the right answer around if the design process leads to outcome that has a significant amount of public realm works that has to be funded, you may well look to us to fund that from selling some of the land that isn't part of the public realm. So it doesn't necessarily, the change of use doesn't mean the site's going on the market tomorrow. If you agree the change of use, we then go through the process to work through with the community what future development might look like and that may well involve council keeping some of the land or selling some of the land, but that will come, that's in the future. We will arrive at that.
So at the moment, so the change of use means no sale, doesn't guarantee a sale.
Correct.
And it doesn't guarantee the removal of the current number of car parks on that site.
No, the cars stay on that site, and the current AT's plan is that when the larger car park on Gasometer is completed, at that point this site could be available for creating public space.
We don't know that yet, do you? Because you haven't come up with a plan. So potentially, even with the change of use, you could have this current number of car parks on that site.
But the purpose of the change of use will be to remove that surface car park from this site.
One level surface car park over quite a wide area.
Over a hectare,
yeah. But it doesn't necessarily mean, because we haven't done the design, so it doesn't mean that you would naturally remove the current number of car parks, does it?
There could be car parks in any new development on part of the site. Overall, the Gasometer car park is providing more car parks.
I know.
Okay, I think you say.
Well, getting a little bit disorderly.
Yeah.
We need one speaker.
I think
specifically, I'm just saying.
Maybe I'm missing the question.
The simple question is, I've heard you talk about completing another car park
yes.
before this one has changed, but you haven't actually said, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen to the site yet. We're just potentially changing the use. We don't. The decision today doesn't necessarily mean that there will be the removal of the current number of car parks on that site, because no one's figured out what it's going to look like.
Correct. That wouldn't happen until later, if that's what your question is.
So it's specific. My third question, Mr. Chair, if I may, to Megan. Mm-hmm. Because there are three things for me that people seem to be worried about. Lack of car parking space there, and I've dealt with that. It may still be there in that same site. We don't know yet. There will be no sale there's no guarantee that there will be a sale. We don't know yet that. And the third thing is they're very keen on their market. And why did you not include in recommendation AI1? You said include a town square, but you haven't mentioned any reference to the fact that the market should, well, that's what everyone says.
Mr. Chairman, that was my recommendation,
yeah,
not
just
Megan.
For clarification.
Sorry. I'll reflect it to
Councillor. Or our recommendation.
Hooper through the chair.
Just for clarification, you're asking that of Clive. Clive's from Panuku. He was not a hearings commissioner.
No, I changed my ask
it's asking
Megan,
me,
but I was wrong. It should have gone straight to Linda, sorry.
Okay, thank you. And Megan?
If I could just pass that through you to Councillor Cooper as the hearings chair, that will need to respond to that.
Because, Mr. Chairman, we didn't want to get down to that much detail, but because we want the community to make those decisions and the design. And we were very clear that that was important to them. We even had fantastic designs from people in the community about how they would like the. So we didn't want to get down to that detail, but basically we wanted to make sure that there was a town square, plaza, public open space, whatever you want to call it, that was there. And then the community decide how that plays out and what kinds of uses that has. So we didn't think that was appropriate to start detailing every single activity that should be on the square, because we could have put Anzac parades and a whole lot of other things that people talked about.
And Councillor, it's a good question, and Councillor Simpson, the B3 expands on the A1, and it refers to the open space provision policy from 2016 for metropolitan centres. And if you were to go there, it's quite clearly outlaid.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
I've been listening intently, and I looked back to the March 2016 Auckland Development Committee report, and what's patently obvious to me is there's a breakdown in relationship now with the Devonport Takapuna local board over this project. And having been through similar with Three Kings, Eden Park, Unity, what else did we do? The Mount Albert upgrade. Part of this is the relationship with the local board. You know, this project will be all the better for a good relationship with the Devonport Takapuna Local Board. And in the March report, in fact, it says it's critical, to Panuku, that Panuku works well with everybody. So my question is to the ward councillor who's chairing this meeting. I haven't heard from you, and unfortunately Councillor Hills is gone. I'd actually like to hear why you as the ward councillor are at odds with the local board. And that's my first question. I've got another question after that. If you might answer that as the ward councillor, not the chair.
Thanks.
It's not about the chair.
Thanks for the invitation. And I have a speaking right here, and I'm asking for questions at the moment, and I can make my statements as I feel
All
and
right.
will
Well, my next question then,
when I take my speaking turn.
Okay, my next question is also to you as the chair this time. And that's given that you probably, these recommendations up there are pretty important. How did the local board respond when they saw them? So have you, in other words, have you asked them, does this fulfil their needs somehow?
No, I took Councillor Cooper's report, which came to me late last week, and I looked at those recommendations. I consulted legal on what you could do on receiving the recommendations of commissioners and whether you could go outside of what the commissioners have recommended. And I think it was today's Tuesday. Yesterday, I got advice from legal that you could make further recommendations, but they could not be outside of the scope of what was conveyed in the Commissioner's recommendations. So the reds, which I've worked through with Councillor Cooper, are very much what was considered in evidence and considered by the Commissioners, and they are all within scope of those Romans 1 to 4 generally as well.
That's
so
good.
there is limitations.
So have you run them past the local board who were here this morning?
Oh, they were finalised this morning at about 9 a.m.
Wow. Have you, or will you? So
They are there now. Councillor, do you have another question? Oh. Councillor Newman.
Thank you. I'm not sure actually if my question can be answered, because I have a question regarding the submissions process in the consultation that was considered by the hearings panel. Firstly, before I ask that, is the officers able to answer that? I understand it's appended to our report, so I kind of wanted to question on that, but I also acknowledge that it was a matter that was considered previously. So,
what's the question?
Okay. Well, my question relates to really going to the point that the chair, Mr. Gillen, raised about where those submissions came from. In the report that was considered by the commissioners, it refers to the legal obligation to consult, which is set out on pages on paras 19, 20, 21, 22 of the report, which is on pages 94, 95 of our agenda, and it refers to the 1963 Local Authorities Loan Board, blah, 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 blah. So there was, this area has been paid for by a lot of ratepayers in that part of Auckland over a long period of time. So I'm particularly interested.
So the actual car park, the car park was purchased with effectively a targeted rate on a specific number of ratepayers around the edge of the car park.
Yeah.
But the nature of the consultation process, it was also seen as a matter of high local interest. Yep. So the consultation both went to the people who had been had been subject to the targeted rate, those businesses, those buildings, and also went to the wider community as well, because it was a matter of significance.
It says here, para 20. 40 Anzac Street was purchased with a special loan that was paid off in a separate rate, which was charged to the commercial properties. Takapuna Central Area. The loan was repaid fully in 1989. A separate rate was no longer charged at the time.
Correct.
So, yep. Okay. So, I'm very interested in the breakdown of the submissions and where they've come from, and that information is not really addressed in the subsequent attachment. Is the information about where those submissions it's sourced from. Is that available somewhere? I'm interested to know if the submitters were from the area or not. I think that's important information given the nature of how this was funded in the first place.
If we can go to page 102, please. Oh, Kate, can you read 102 or bring us to 102, the geographic breakdown?
So on page 102 is a breakdown by local board of the submissions. 38% were from the Devonport Takapuna local board, 11% from the Kaipatiki local board, 5% from the Hibiscus and Bays, 14% were from other, and 32% had not supplied their local board area in their submission.
Okay, so the Devonport Takapuna area would have been the area historically where the rate would have been applied, the old borough council in the area. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
The targeted rate only. Okay.
Yeah, that was just immediately Takapuna. It was very close. The property was very close proximity to the site.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay. Thank you. I reserve my right to speak.
Great, thank you. Councillor Cashmore.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the second series of recommendations. They do bring some clarity, especially bearing in mind that this is one of the premier sites in this city. It's a magnificent space. And one I'd be very keen to live on in a few years' time, with my dotage, which is probably not that far away. But this particular series of recommendations, don't laugh, Mr. Mayor, these particular series of recommendations potentially unlock this Takapuna CBD area for substantial improvement. And we've heard already about the consultation going back through the community, so that was one of my questions. We've heard that is going to happen. We've heard about continued local board involvement. The vision of the possibilities will be enabled by this unlock. So we'll be able to then, like you say, this is what it could be. It could be a park in an atrium. It could be anything from 101 different scenarios. At the end of the day, where does the decision-making lie for the process? Does it lie partially with the local board, partially with Panuku, or does it come back here? Just step us through, if you would please, the process going forward for decision-making. My first.
And in a sense, that could take a variety of forms depending on how ideal solutions emerge. So, for example, under your civic space policy, there has to be agreement to the costs of those through the governing body, so that so there's a line of approval back to you for that. You've got separate debates coming up about Panuku's ability to reinvest funds in areas, so that will be how that develops and how the public realms develop will be subject to the outcomes of those discussions. I think, and then there's another interesting layer that there's opportunities potentially, so within parts of the council, opportunities, for example, to take the opportunity of bringing some community facilities into the centre. So again, that would go back into those channels through council and the decision-making processes. So I think there's a number of components in terms of shaping up what might be the ideal solution here. I think the chair's recommendation suggests that Panuku comes back and at least workshops its indicative draft designs back with this committee. So I think there's many opportunities along the path to pick up both local board feedback, this committee's feedback, and the specific interest that might relate to any other arms of council that as various initiatives are developed. The AT are looking at the future of I think it's the 4th or 5th busiest passenger transport hub in the region. In central Takapuna, there's something like 40 or 50,000 boardings a day. So that needs to be, the bounds of that need to be set to be appropriate, and some of that might encroach on some of this site. I think there's a journey ahead to get this right, and I think some of the decisions will be the decisions needed depending on what those little parts of investments are. If that's not too vague.
I get it, because I think that's the important part, Mr. Chair. I've got a subsequent question. So there is an opportunity to look at something very special for a very, very special part of Auckland that currently is a little bit tired, and it can be moved forward, and this could be the unlock. The second point would be saying no today denies that potential flat. So what would happen then with this Takapuna potential be lost back to the bottom of the Panuku's queue, and we'd be waiting for another generation before we get the chance to do this?
Well, I think that would be. I think the board, the Panuku board, have to digest it. But it would seem little ability to progress with the unlocked Takapuna project without the two interrelated sites. One of them not being able to be. I mean, the rationale for building the Kosomata car park is to take the cars off the Anzac site in order to allow the unlocking and the transformational change you're talking about. If there's no intent to change, if the intent is to leave the car park, then there's no point building the other car park. So that might just be.
So, Mr. Chair, that just brings home my point. This is an opportunity that perhaps we should take rather than let go for quite some considerable period of time. This is an area that is deserving of some inputs and could be certainly advantageous to the whole of Takapuna and to the city.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. I've just got a question around process, and equally it goes to trust and public concern about public land. And that is whether or not the local board, for example, and the community and the business community cannot drive further discussion, engagement and participation around what happens in this space, rather than jumping to a decision around mixed use now, particularly when there are so many issues that keep bubbling up around parking and underground parking and biking and walking and all sorts of things. So is that not a pragmatic option that we could consider?
So is the question, could we consider involving key stakeholders in the community?
Do we need to go to mixed use now when we could determine that we want to have more genuine engagement with the community, and particularly the local community, the businesses, the people that live in the area? Because it strikes me from what I'm hearing that once we've got mixed use, it pretty much appears to presuppose sale of part of the area on Panuku's part in order to do some development. That's frankly is what I see on the table.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think it was possibly touched on and clarified in other questions that a decision today is the statutory decision to allow the change of use. Just that decision alone doesn't unleash something that happens tomorrow to sell the land or develop the land. So then there is the consultation process that I think you referred to as being desired. So that certainly takes at the end of that. Then there's a sense of, well, what is the right actions? And so if there's a lot of public realm, then there's public realm, and that's consistent with the mixed use terminology. So it could be a relocated library, it could be another community facility, it could be a whole range of things that could take place on the land, which would fall under that umbrella term of mixed use.
I guess my question is whether Panuku actually needs to drive this at this point in time, or whether or not it's actually better for the local board and the community and the business community to drive it around further consultation and engagement and working a number of things up.
So, Councillor Walker, that's what the red recommendations actually direct. And
no, that's not.
Okay, but that's your interpretation. I would say otherwise. But Councillor Quacks, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a follow up from the question that Councillor Simpson asked about whether the site would be sold, and I think that your answer to that, Clive, was that no, there's no guarantee that the site would be sold. But yet, in the consultation document that went out, it clearly states that the site would be sold and developed by a private developer. The proposed change of use would involve the sale.
Well, it could.
But so, are we being totally honest? Yes. In the consultation process, when it now seems to have changed somewhat from, well, we may not sell it, to a document which went out for consultation which said, yes, it would be sold.
Yep. So I think if we step back, I mean, certainly in March 16, the Auckland Development Committee passed a resolution which agreed in principle to the sale of the site. So that's what started us on the work. We can't deal with any sale until we get through. We can't deal with any we can't implement any action, whether it's public realm, whether it's grassing it. Even to cover it all in grass needs a change of use agreed. I'd have thought, in terms of the many conversations that you have, whether it's in the Finance Committee or whatever, around Panuku's mandate and how Panuku is using land to create funds, selling some land, developing land to get funds to reinvest, to braise up the whole quality of the environment, is a well-trodden path. I think that's well understood and has been done in a number of areas. And there's nothing exceptional about Takapuna in that regard. Is that the combination? So the large gasometer site, part of that can be sold to help pay for the cost of the car park. I think that's almost as a business as usual model, I think, as that we work. In terms of the Anzac site, if we want high quality public realm, it may well be that it's part of the desired solution is to get some other development around the edges of the site, which could be achieved by selling some of that land. And I think that seems, I would have thought that was a sort of a well ingrained process that's been worked through many occasions.
And just a comment, Mr. Chair, in regards to B, number 5, I was wondering if that shouldn't read for any residential development. Just the word residential is there and it's followed by a full stop.
Yeah.
Which leads me on to a question, is that, and I've heard some comment already, some commentary already about, well, Panuku would set up the developer agreements, but you're asking a private developer, presumably, to jump through a whole bunch of hoops, which will make this much more difficult to develop that particular site to what you actually have in mind. Would that be fair comment?
Well, I think that's a space that Panuku operates in. So if you think of some of the waterfront development and some of the apartment developments down there, there are quite strict conditions around, if you like, the desired form of those developments. So so there was a lot of conditions around the development agreements that the developers had to comply with in order to achieve the quality of developments that you now can see. So I think that is part of the process to try and. I think there's always, Panuku sees a reputational risk if we just sell land with no restrictions and see suboptimal development. So I think in an important site, that's where you'd move to the other end of the spectrum and probably put a high degree of control to get a high quality outcome.
And a very high priced outcome.
Well, sometimes that's conversations that that you have in other committees around. Well, that comes down to the way the land's sold, or if the land's sold, on how that's dealt with. It's a factor, isn't it, around some commercial elements.
Councillor Quacks, can I just check with you on that Roman 5B5 residential? It does assume residential development.
Well, it should be development. Should read.
I'm happy to just make it clear.
Yeah.
But just Homestar only applies to residential anyway. Yeah. But happy to include that.
Well, I think we need to be as transparent as we possibly can. Not everybody understands Homestar built rating as well as you do, Mr. Chairman. And I would suggest that the vast majority of people out there don't understand it. So I think the word development would be very appropriate in this particular case. So, if this B only applies, of course, if A goes through. If A is
we can take the A first. Thank you. Just on that, Clive, I've recently learned that Panuku board has just signed up to Homestar, or the 6 Homestar rating. Correct. As normal business now.
Across anywhere, any site that facilitates residential development anywhere in the city, it would require Homestyle 6.
And that is a new decision of the board.
Correct.
A couple of weeks ago.
Correct.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Lee.
Sorry.
Thank you. This case just underlines, in my view, the ambivalent or contradictory expectations we have of Panuku. One, to sell as much property as it can, and the other, to develop and be engaged in urban renewal, and sometimes there's a conflict, and this seems to reflect that. Can I ask, Clive, after the decision, after Panuku gained the agreement of the governing body to sell the land in question, it was obliged, or the council, I guess, was obliged to go through a formal process in changing its land use, changing its zoning. Obviously, the change of zoning would enhance the commercial value of the land in question. Would that be right?
But the land was already zoned, had the commercial zoning through the unitary plan, so it's got a designation for a car park on it, but it is zoned. It was already zoned for mixed-use town centre.
Though the hearing panel consultation and decision was based on changing the zoning, right?
No.
No.
Through the chair, this is not
you help me on
an
that?
RMA zoning, so it's not a unitary plan zoning question. This is, as a council-owned property under the Local Government Act, its use. So it's not a zoning, a land use zoning question under the unitary plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's a physical use of a piece of land owned by the council under the Local Government Act.
Okay, so the zoning is in the unitary plan,
Yep.
and this really is a formality, a legally required formality to go to the public so that the use of this land can comply with the zoning in the unitary plan. Is that right? Correct?
The change of use would, so if this was passed and that this site would change use from just a car park to mixed use, whatever that might look like into the future, that would align with the zoning of the property under the unitary plan? Yep.
So it's a two-step process. Okay. The recommendations would confirm the unitary, legalise the use that is set out in the unitary plan, and therefore that would enhance the value of this part of the portfolio.
Well, the council was the implicit value is there if the council gets through the change of use process, but it can't get to the value without the change of use.
Yes, so it would. Thank you. What I think has the council has realised is how important and strategically important this car park is, and reflected in the very long list of recommendations added. Do you see, would it make more sense to try and achieve these public benefits? And the word public is used all the way through the recommendations: public open space, people orientation, civic space, public gathering and markets and so on. Wouldn't it make sense therefore not to sell or privatise this land, given all the public use value that it has? Would that be right?
Well, I think in terms of meeting the aspirations conveyed in both the hearings panel, that I think that clearly indicates that a large part of the site will be retained in public ownership.
So it won't all be sold?
No.
Well, a large part will definitely be retained in public ownership, and the balance may be sold. That depends on. So, for example, if there were community uses, who knows? It could stay. Some of it could stay. But some of the developed part could still stay in council ownership.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, can I just confirm something that might be an assumption, just for clarification here? The role of Panuku as a CCO is to deliver council's objectives. So that's just, you might say that's motherhood and apple pie, but
the ones you give to it through its statement of
the statement of intent.
Yeah. Not all of them.
And I would say that we are very lucky to have Panuku, but a real dilemma for them, I have observed, and I'd like, if you wish, Clive, for you to confirm this, that on the one hand that we want them to play a very active role in placemaking, but on the other hand we want them to derive maximum value from any surplus property that we might have, and that at times can be a conflict.
I think it's hard to do all things on every site every time. So I think Panuku sees as a sliding scale of activity. There are areas, there are properties which can be that maybe in remains of road projects or whatever that are simply sold in the market at the best price we can get. I think there are other areas where there's far more, if you like, care because it's linked into some place activation or place making process where you're deliberately creating new public realm in a way that you might not on another site. So I'd have thought these priority areas, there's more of a balance here between trying to create the quality urban design outcomes and balance that with the commercial outcomes.
Can you confirm that where council has done its job properly and there is master planning, just for lack of a better word, undertaken where there is community buy-in, it is easier for Panuku to execute the outcomes that council wishes?
Yeah, I think if we look to the waterfront as well, where the predecessor of Panuku carried out extensive master planning and is now then moving around the various parts of that, and I think that's why there's similar work underway in other of the priority areas that Panuku's working on. But that's why some of that framework planning, working closely with the unitary plan structure, is the important first step.
So, Mr. Chairman, I guess where I'm coming from, and I don't want to end up in the same situation that we got to at a finance committee meeting where Panuku came to us with disposal of land, surplus land. It was Browns Bay. It was a car park, and then there were no limitations on its use, but there was a sort of panacea given that somehow or another, if it was sold to foodstuffs, then it would continue to act as a car park and everyone would be a winner. Well, I found that, and I've actually written to Panuku on that one, because I think they were placed in an invidious position, and I think we've got the precedent perhaps for this to happen again, and I want to see this avoided. I really think it's important. I am not in any way opposed to the council with surplus land selling it, and when we do sell it, we should sell it for the best possible dollar that we can get. But I think we've got ourselves in a real old pickle here, because we've given a complex brief to Panuku, and we don't have the master planning that I think is going to be necessary to be worked through with the local board and get consensus with the local board. And I just wonder whether there is an opportunity for us to actually have some revision on this and go back in terms of further planning that could take place in order that we can actually use our excellent officers from Panuku to be able to deliver the outcomes without, at the moment, this is a really awkward situation, and I, for one, feel uncomfortable with it. So just would seek your guidance on this, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So you referred to the master planning, and I think the red recommendations reflect to the master planning process and the extensive socialisation of all the ideas, exploring design competitions, the provision of public space there for a town square is an absolute given, I believe. It's been articulated in numerous documents. But look, I thank you for your contribution to the debate on that matter, but that you can't actually get into design until you have change the use. And that has been articulated.
I don't agree. There are precedents. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I have to challenge you on that.
And that is fine. You asked me for a response, and that is the advice that we had from our staff earlier. But thank you. So there are speaking turns and questions here, members. So, Councillor Filipaina, was it a statement or a question?
No, it's going to be a question, and the first one is a question of clarification.
Yes.
Now, Clive, Councillor Quacks asked a question of you based on Councillor Simpson's question, and the implication that, what I've got was that you had said something misleading, which I thought wasn't, because the question I recall, and this is the clarification point I want to make, the question I recall from Councillor Simpson to you was if there was a buyer ready to purchase the car park, and that was the question, and your reply was no, there wasn't. So I just want to clarify that was the comment that you made. I just wanted to sort of
I think that there were two questions. One, have we got someone lined up ready to sell? And the answer is no. And if you pass this resolution today, are we going to sell it tomorrow? And the answer is no. So could some sale of part of the land happen at some point in the future after we've agreed the form of development and the land and taken out the public realm? Then the answer is possibly yes.
Okay, and just a question on, and it's again a further clarification question, Chair, and it's around unlocked takapuna, which I've read.
Yep.
Now, if this doesn't go through, does that again? I just want to confirm that if this doesn't go through, unlocked takapuna will be taken off Panuku's books or reduced down to something else. That's the question, and I'll be ignoring the people behind you.
Yeah,
but
no, I think
so I just wanted to
look. If the decision was made today not to proceed with a change of use, that's obviously something that has to go back to our board. But just sort of at the executive level, the feeling is that there are basically the unlocked takapuna gave Panuku the ability to do with two sites, and if one of them was to build cars so you could deal with the other site, then if you can't then deal with the other site, then why do anything?
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. One more quick question, if I can.
Councillor Newman. Quick question. Thank you.
If part of the moving forward here is to provide car parking, maybe multi-level car parking, that doesn't fully capitalise the site like a full commercial building. If we're not fully capitalising the site because we're just putting great big multi-level car parking, is there an opportunity, if supplementary to that we're doing some, say, residential housing, that can be affordable housing?
I think if the scheme, if the desired package of development for the site includes some residential, this is sort of central Takapuna residential rather than beachfront residential, because you can go to 9 stories, but you can go to 7 stories on Hurstmere Road. So you've really only got the top 2 floors that can see over the top of them. So most of them are going to be looking in. That's why that central environment needs to be attractive. I think we certainly look. It's easy to say yes but we know that affordability also relates to the size of units. So you can have it's all very well saying it's got to be under 600,000, but if that's a 1-bedroom unit, it's much easier for a 1-bedroom unit to be under 600,000 than a 3-bedroom unit. So, but I would have thought there is the potential, and of course there's lots of water to flow under the bridge with housing and affordability and various other things. There's certainly a strong possibility that a number of the units, the smaller units, would be at a price point which that should be broadly in that heading of affordable.
If the focus here, and it is a message that the governing body has sent back to Panuku to take a haircut on price for the delivery of a quantum of product to meet a need that is consistent with the strategic objective of this council, one of them would be affordable housing. Not every affordable dwelling needs to be in South Auckland. There'd be demand here too, wouldn't there?
Yes, most certainly. Yeah, and affordability, and I think that's why it's interesting looking at, you know, there's a pilot in Hobsonville to provide some, you know, just affordable rental accommodation as well. So there's a number of ways, key worker housing. There's a number of ways to try and deliver affordable housing, and I think we're just exploring every opportunity to do that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cooper, quick question?
No, because it's already up there, Mr Chairman, so I thought we were debating by some of the
people have been
comments, so
debating.
I'm just not quite sure where we're at. I'd close the debate if I spoke, so I won't.
Okay, Councillor Sayers, quick question?
I've got a question then, and then one. Are you taking comments as well?
People have been, I did ask for questions and statements later, but many people have already spoken, so I'll allow you to ask a question and make your statement.
Very good. Question, I'm just curious around the revenue that's being generated off the site. I've heard that there's both a market there and a car park at the moment. I assume that revenue is going to Auckland Transport. Could I just get an indication of how much money is being generated? With the thought in the back of my mind, Mr Chair, the reason for the question is if Auckland Transport want to invest into the public amenity of that site, obviously there's some sort of revenue that's coming through that would allow them to do that.
Not a car
Clive, you have a...
Yeah, we're just conferring, because you're absolutely right. There are two income streams on the car park. One's the revenue that Auckland Transport collects for the parking, and the other's the money it gets on the Sunday morning for the market. Have we got that broken down?
I don't have the figures for the parking revenue. I do know the lease value for the Sunday market, 76,000 a year.
Okay, so I'd imagine it would be well over $1 million with the car parking, but we haven't got that figure.
No, we don't have that. It's actually quite cheap car parking. I think it's $1 for about 3 hours, something like that.
So look, my comment, and thank you.
Why would you want to go over there anyway?
Sorry, let's just come back to the question. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you. So look, my comment is, if this isn't successful today, that I don't think it should be taken as a no to not wanting to unlock Takapuna. I think what my feel of the room is that if it did fail today, it's more the fact that the local board and the community, for some reason, haven't bought into it, and there's a desperation that they want to. So, look, if it was unsuccessful today, I think the message to Panuku should be, hey, look, Takapuna deserves to be unlocked, it deserves investment, but we need to have another look at the approach and get buy-in, particularly I would suggest from the local board.
Thank you. Mayor Goff.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr Chair. I've listened carefully to the debate all the way through and asked some questions at the beginning when the local board was presenting. My view is basically this: if the overwhelming view of the community and the board was that you would rather have a car park and the current state of the buildings in that area rather than a rejuvenated civic square and an upgrade of the town centre, I'd be inclined to vote against this recommendation. But I'm not sure that that's what you're telling us. I listened carefully to what Grant said this morning, and he said he shared the vision of Panuku for the development of this area. And I'm presuming that the vision for this area is not a car park. A car park is not a vision. My vision of, and I'm speaking as an outsider, so I acknowledge that you're the important people, that you're making the decision. But you've got a fantastic location and a great community, and there's so much that could be done with that area. But what I'm detecting from you is a level of uncertainty that if we pass this, that you have no further say in how that development goes ahead. And I can understand that. So my questions, I guess, to Megan and to Clive are twofold. And you've partly answered them, but I want real clarity around it. Firstly, if we pass this today with the new conditions that Linda Cooper and Chris Darby have put in there, what assurance can you give to local residents that the decisions are not fait accompli, that there will be genuine engagement, genuine decision-making involving the local community? And the second is just to explore the option, and I guess this goes to you, Clive, and your board. If we say no to this today, and Panuku is dealing with a request now to create 5,000 new affordable houses in Auckland every year, and you've got at least 10 other development sites, why would you come back to here if the community isn't keen to proceed?
So, thank you, Mr Chairman. So I think the first question related to
fait accompli. What assurance?
So absolutely unequivocal commitment from Panuku to involve the local board and the residents in the development of options, plans, and concepts for the use of this land. So that's I think Panuku stands by a strong sense of wanting to do community engagement very well, and I think we should be measured by a project like this, I think, in terms of how well we do it. In terms of new housing, I really do think there's a connection between making the centre attractive and then actually making the most out of the development potential of the private land that surrounds the centre as well. So it's not just the loss of some housing that Panuku might get built on council land. It's the 1 + 1 = 3. It's by the centre being more attractive, the more actually happens the more quality development happens in the surrounding area as well. So the wins for the council are much larger than simply just a small number of houses on the council land. So I think that's an important point to bear in mind. But look, I know we're reporting to the council in different forms, but we're trying very hard to identify how we can optimise the amount of housing that we do produce on land.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Goff. Councillor Watson, please.
Are we speaking now,
Absolutely,
Mr. Chair?
yes.
I guess, like the Mayor sitting here listening to all the various discussions this morning, the concerning thing for me is that if there was one place in Auckland or one local board where you would have thought there was a realisation very early on in the piece that you had to carry the local community and the local board, it would have been Takapuna. We had the Takapuna Holiday Park shambles that just seem to go on ad infinitum, and it appears to me, from the relative neutrality of an observer, is that we're about to embark on a repetition of that with the community and with the local board. If this, with all due respect, if this is the angst that exists after, a year of consultation, or however how many months of consultation it was, I think it's a little optimistic to suddenly think that people are now at the 11th hour are going to be reassured by a swag of recommendations that all assume a degree of goodwill and trust that clearly isn't there. We've heard that this morning. I thought Councillor Fletcher was starting to move the right way in suggesting that I think there's a case here for trying to get people on board, because people are saying the same thing here. Everyone agrees that there should be a change of use here, that it is an incredibly important and significant part of Takapuna. Takapuna is the jewel in the crown of the North Shore. It is a beautiful place, not just for people from Takapuna and Milford and Devonport, for people from all over the North Shore, from Birkdale, from Glenfield. We go to Takapuna. That's been our place where we look upon as the heart, if you like, of the North Shore. So this is incredibly important, and I agree with all the people that have attached that importance to it, that degree of aspiration, that this is just not, flog it off and chuck up a few buildings and, things will be right for the next few years. The people, to their credit, are looking decades ahead here. They don't want to stuff this up, to put it crudely. They want a public realm here that is worthy of Takapuna, and that is worthy of next generations that are coming along that will hopefully enjoy Takapuna the same a lot of us people in the North Shore did for decades. And they are not getting that feeling with this. Clearly they're not. Or else we wouldn't be hearing such strong views. They don't have any confidence in the process as it has unwound, so it's a little optimistic, I think, to expect them to have optimism going forward. My solution here would be to defer matters, to try and talk to the local board, who clearly represent their community, to try and gain their assurance, or reassure them, I should say, that their concerns are going to be met, because there's a number of significant concerns here that go to open space, the provision of a town square of some magnitude that reflects what's desirable for the hugely intensified population that's going to be living here in the not too distant future. The very important issue of transportation, it hasn't been mentioned so much, but the extent to which this area could serve as a more into the future of a transportation hub. And AT's comments were a little, dismissive in that. They made some reference to it serving interests now and the foreseeable future. I think they're looking for a little bit more than that. And not least of which is the viability, the survivability of the businesses, the very people who actually paid for this land. And we all know in the current commercial environment, many businesses and businesses in Takapuna face a real challenge. They're competing with Albany Mall, where people just come from all over Auckland to. So they've got a genuine concern there that I don't think is being addressed by the gasometer site, which is on the periphery of Takapuna, which does involve a bit of walking, which might be okay for a lot of people, but not for older people and perhaps not for people with families. So there's a whole lot of very real and very significant concerns that perhaps could be allayed somewhat by some open dialogue, and that wins the local board over and therefore the community. Now, to me, that would seem to be a far more preferable way to proceed, rather than just to pretend, well, okay, everything's going to be sweet as now, guys. We've got all that. Yeah, we'll have urban design, we'll have a open space there, and we will consult. Why not get people's buy-in and then come back to us with that? Isn't that a better way to go forward? That's the way I think I'd be doing it if I was calling the shots around here.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Just to take my speaking turn, I first came to this square, this area of Anzac Street car park in about 2005, or maybe late 2005, when I was a new North Shore City Councillor, and we tried to acquire the Burger King site. And the councillors signed up to it, but then they put a caveat on it, and they wouldn't let the officers proceed beyond a $50,000 band. And we missed out on that site by that $50,000. I came back to the site in 2010 when we passed the 2010 Takapuna Strategic Framework, and Chair Gillen was a councillor then, and he voted for it and I voted for it, and it made clear reference about Anzac Car Park for redevelopment as high quality retail, commercial and civic precinct. 2010, that's for the first confirmed document. Then we went through to 2014, the Takapuna Centre Plan by the board at the time. It talked about a high quality open space, mixed use development that can unify the heart of the centre. That is from the local board from that period. That has not been rescinded. That is still live. The Takapuna Strategic Framework, again updated in 2014, spoke about the Anzac Street car park redevelopment and improved connections between the centre and Takapuna. The Takapuna Devonport Local Board Plan of around about the same time, the Anzac Street car park sits at the centre. It went on to talk about the redevelopment. Great open spaces, new shops, businesses and places to live that unify the heart of Takapuna. We've had this former council adopt, and the local board also endorsed the high-level project plan, which had all the same words in it. This is not new about the change of use. They signed up to it. None of that has been rescinded by the local board or by this committee. And the Takapuna Reference Group, a broad church of representatives, came to the board early this year, and they said, and they recommended a heart be created on the current Anzac Street car park in the form of a civic plaza. And the list goes on and on. Members, the history of this change of use is in about 6 documents. It goes back at least to 2010, when the former North Shore City Council signed up for a future change of use. And it has been through an exhaustive process. It is And it is now culminating to a point where we are at the edge of changing the use, and then we can embark on defining the future and the qualities that we all want to achieve here. The motions that have been put up to you today reinforce and they pick up on the board resolution of 17th of October, which only recently came to me, the 19th of October, and it emphasises great design. It emphasises ongoing collaboration with the community, and that is genuine. It emphasises that we're going to test this design with the best. We're going to refer it to the urban design panel or something similar. I know Panuku have got their own urban designers as well. So we're going to engage those experts. We are going to bring to the fore sustainable design and universal design, and that was brought to the attention of the commissioners as well by submitters. We're going to further explore the car parking options. That was brought to the attention of the commissioners. And we're going to re-establish the Greater Takapuna Reference Group or something similar so that we get that deep tentacles into the community ongoing. It effectively was disestablished. We can't have that. I'd like to see it be reporting to this committee, to Panuku, and to the local board. That's how thoroughly we can do this. We have done it thoroughly in the past. It has been well signalled this direction, members. But first, you actually need to change the use so that you can embark on that next journey of the design. And that design is not just going to be by experts in isolation, by architects or landscape architects. It is going to be in conjunction with the community, with this governing body group, with Panuku, and with the local board. There has been huge commitment over a long time to this change of use. And I've just reminded you of the history. 2010, by the North Shore City Council, multiple boards, 3 boards, the former council, this council. And I think we're entirely consistent with that direction. You can't have a clean slate to design until you've changed the use from car parking to mixed use. And in fact, the market, its presence there is only legitimised by mixed use. It's not actually legitimised by a car parking use. So that's a technical thing and we'll ignore it, of course. But that's the nub of it, members. We have to change the use before we can embark on design. There has been huge commitment and recent financial commitment, and we can announce today that number 30 Hurstmere Road has been acquired by this council, by Panuku on behalf of the council, for a sum of $2 million. That signals the level of financial commitment to this project of unlocking Takapuna and opening up this, what is really a soulless car park that severs the east and the west sides of the centre at the moment. Some would say it is already a town square. For 6 hours on a Sunday, it is a town square. It could be, we could have a town square there for 184 hours of the week, not just 6 hours. There could be a Wednesday market. There could be performance there on a Friday night. There could be pop-up commerce. There could be protest. There can be social gathering. That is the vision that I think we all have. But first, we've got to change the use. I think, members, the motions that reflect the Devonport Takapuna local board resolutions of the 19th, worked up by myself and Councillor Linda Cooper, do show a direction, a way forward. They navigate a path where we can get the very best outcomes and we can do it all together. And I ask that you support those resolutions A and B. Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Well, I guess I'm at total odds with you, Mr. Chair. I would suggest that we don't have to have a change of use to engage genuinely with the community. As you pointed out, we've had a great deal of engagement to date, and it follows that there is no reason why that engagement should not continue. I would suggest that there is a severe lack of trust on the part of the community with process, and that that lack of trust is well-founded. I'd just like to take a moment just to read from another document that we signed off today, and that is around the Auckland Plan refresh, and I'm just joining the dots, and that says, and it goes to local leadership and decision-making, a society in which most people participate in civic and community life means they have more influence over the decisions that affect their lives. It is also one where people have a high degree of confidence in their governmental institutions. I would suggest that there is a crisis in confidence in this council, and it is ongoing because of the way that what happens in these committees at this level is at odds with the local board and is at odds with the community. And that is clearly evident today. Anyone can see it. It's very clear, and it was very clear to me last night when I went to the car park. I tried to find a park there. I had a lot of difficulty. I just managed to find one. And I went and had a chat with some local people that were concerned. And I looked at the businesses and I evaluated things, and it was pretty clear to me that those businesses all around that area are vitally dependent on parking. And we all know that it's going to get incredibly tough. So what we've got in this area is this is the beating heart. It's been identified by the community as the heart of Takapuna. It's the beating heart of the businesses. And they depend on the parking for their businesses right now, and it's going to get really tough with what's happening elsewhere, but also with online marketing. So you wouldn't start playing around with open heart surgery that could effectively knock those businesses out. Equally, the market that exists is also a thriving, beating heart of that community. And markets in villages and towns have always been the beating heart of those communities. And yes, we can do a lot more with that area. No, we can't. But I would say that the solutions to that and the engagement around that and the participation around that are best led by the community, the local businesses, the community, and the local board, and not Panuku. Not Panuku. My experience recently of Panuku is a threat to flog off part of the marina at West Harbour without engagement from the community. So they can say things, but that is my experience. And that is the experience of that community, which is another community that right now is up in arms. So this is not just Takapuna, this is happening elsewhere. So I say we need to vote this down. We need to put our trust in the community. That is what I would like to see, Mr. Chair, and I know that that is absolutely what the community would like to see.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see this as a chicken egg, actually. Potentially, if you vote to change the use into mixed use and then go out and consult with the community, you are saying that you can involve, potentially do anything that they want, but more, because it's not just a car park, it's other things. So it could still have car parking facilities, and I asked that question, and it could still have lots of other things that they want, including the town square and their market and everything else. If you vote it down, you are saying basically that it can only be a car park, and that's a very big element of what they currently want anyway. So it's kind of a bit of both. I do understand where Councillor Watson is coming from. He's saying potentially if you wait a month, you could kill two birds with one stone. You could get the community to understand that mixed use, which is what we're being asked to do now, would be okay if they understood the absolute detail with it. I think there has been a real disconnect between the local board and Panuku, and that's a bit of a shame, I think. It's not every day that the governing body follows everything that local boards want, and I get that. But in this case, it seems to be really significant. And I suppose from me, they are part of their delegation is understanding the business improvement districts. Part of their delegation is being the voice of their community. And they're telling us today that both of those groups don't agree with us. And I worry about that. I do. I absolutely worry about that. But I think potentially with a little bit more time, you could get everyone to one space. So without making anything rash, I would just hold the line caller and potentially buy a little bit of time.
Thank you. Councillor Newman.
Oh, not him again.
Yes. Thanks, Toe. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, this is a little bit like a play, and everybody sort of knows what's going to happen, but nobody's prepared to come out and say what's about to happen at that particular site. But let's be clear about this. Here's how it goes. Change the function of the site, and then what there will be is there will be some part of the site will be developed for a car park, and bits and pieces of it will be privatised for multi-use, multi-level housing units. There'll be some public open space with some eateries and what have you, but it will fundamentally change, and nobody's prepared to come out and say that's going to happen, but that's precisely what's going to happen. And clearly there is real concern in that community about that process. I mean, it's an extraordinary document, Mr. Chair. I've got a lot of time for Panuku, and we've been talking about communications, but this illustration on the front page of this consultation document, really, I mean, a bit of money's being spent on this, Mr. Chair, and there's a very good, we've got people having coffee under umbrellas on the ground level, then at the first level we've got a car park, and then we've got units. And then we've got, on the inside page, it's got, I mean, here's a statement. The alternate is that 40 Anzac Street remain a single-level asphalt car park. I actually think that presupposes an outcome that doesn't need to happen. I think there is plenty of opportunity to do some good master planning work, and I don't think that requires a vote for a change of use today. I think that, Mr. Chair, if I can just state one of the new wording in B left me a bit cold here. I think that B Roman numerals 1, 2 and 3, there's a little bit of marketing in there for me. With respect to 4, note that Panuku will engage independent experts to review and critique future design proposals. I mean, experts, who are these experts? The reference to at least 6 home star building rating for any residential I mean, I don't know what else Panuku is doing if they're not developing sites to increase the supply of housing given the demand there. So, there is an obvious expectation if we were to have Panuku in the space that there would be an increase in residential dwellings. That can all be worked through. But I have to say, Mr. Chair, I don't want to support an outcome that really doesn't take the community along for the ride. And I don't want to take this community for a ride just by simply saying, oh, we're just going to go through an exercise today and then we're going to come back to you and then we're going to basically pull out the plan that we always had, which is what we've illustrated here. I think that there is an opportunity to hit the pause button. I know that Toe's very, very stressed with me right now, but there is no need to pursue this outcome right now, and if you don't vote for this, for Resolution A, it doesn't mean to say that nothing can happen. A lot can happen. There is plenty of scope, plenty of opportunity, if this is a market attractive location, to put the best ability of not only Panuku but also that local board and some of the property owners adjacent to it, and work through a design concept that can be fully socialised, and then come back and consider that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
Well, I came in today with an open mind on this, and I've listened very carefully to all the sides, but what bothers me most really is the difference between March 2016 and today. March 2016, it's a positive, futuristic outlook for Takapuna. Everybody was on board with. Everybody said, great, bring it on. And all that's changed, or what has changed since then, is that there has been an election, there is a new board, and the new board unanimously says, we don't want this to happen in the way that's proposed today. I heard that very clearly. And what's disappointing to me, and I think I'm with Councillor Watson and Councillor Simpson and Councillor Newman, is that had you talked to the local board about this raft of recommendations and manipulated them a little bit to get them on side, we can't be done to. Local communities are tired of that. And I think there's people here today who are saying that. But I remember Three Kings. And I remember how that felt. You know, you have responsibility. We've just done the governance framework review. Local boards have delegated responsibility for placemaking. This is a huge project into the future. They have to be at the table saying, woohoo! They have to be doing that. They're not doing it, so what has to happen between now and then to get them there? So I'm with anybody who wants to say, let's defer this a month for the chair, the ward councillors and Panuku to have an emergency meeting with the local board to draft up something that comes back to us with everybody on board. Easy as that.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. I do have an amendment here. Now, I just need to check. A lot of people have spoken. You can't move a motion if you've spoken.
Exactly. So we've found two who haven't spoken.
Okay, Councillor Quacks, thank you. I'll take... Councillor Filipina, would you like me to make you aware of this amendment?
Well, and Chair, just a clarification question again. Does that therefore mean we will be debating the amendment? Because I think that that's exactly what will happen. We'll have to debate the amendment, then we go back to speaking and debating the what's currently on the table. So I will leave that to you, Chair. I've got no issues in regards to a process, but I'll be guided by you.
Councillor Quacks, can I just go to you? Can I read your amendment?
Yes, sure.
Thank you. Councillor Quacks moved, Councillor Fletcher intending to second, that the decision relating to a change of use for 40 Anzac Street, Takapuna, be deferred so as to allow Panuku to consult with Devonport Takapuna local board as to how the proposal can be progressed. That is the resolution. I need to make the staff aware. Councillor Quacks, I need to make the staff aware of that resolution. I need to understand the implications.
Yes.
I also need to get some feedback from Councillor Cooper. With your agreement, Councillor Quacks and Fletcher, can I just get some feedback? Because this is very late in the procedure. Clive, Megan and Clive on this, and then I'll go to Councillor Cooper.
Mr. Chairman, just a point. I want to make it quite clear that neither Councillor Quacks or I have spoken and am putting forward the amendment. I would request, if time is required for the officers and respectful of that, it's now 10 to 2 and some of us may require a bathroom break.
Yep, we'll complete this item.
We could take a short break to enable that to happen.
No, I'd like to complete this item, then we'll go to lunch. So staff, Megan, Clive, you need to confer first.
I thought this was a political decision.
So, point of order, Chair, just the process.
Councillor
and my point of order is process from here now. That's the point of order. Are we going to put the amendment and then debate the amendment? Just a process point of order, please.
Yes, but I need to get some guidance from the staff.
Okay.
Clive?
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, I don't think the committee or even Panuku want to see a complete rejection of the change of use, because that would have wasted a lot of time and work and seems to be contradictory to the council's broader city development intent. So if buying some time allows some further discussion, and there's been extensive discussion, but more discussion to close the gaps of perception and find a way forward, then that's worth trying.
Okay, Councillor Quacks, I'm going to allow you to move your motion now. We'll put it up there.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it might actually be useful to actually put a time frame around this as well, so that we'd...
You're the mover?
Yeah. So with my seconders, maybe a 6 months period would be useful. If that would be, or maybe even less time than that if you need it. But I think it is useful to be absolutely clear that both the local community and Panuku need to be on board, and they don't. There seems to be at odds at the moment about what's going to happen on this site going forward. And you know, the local board and the local people have been here since 9:30 this morning, and they want to see some resolution. But it shows you how passionate they have been about this whole process, that they've managed to endure this process for as long as they have. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that maybe 6 months.
Councillor Cracks, can I suggest by March, consider the budget implications in our LTP as well. And the LTP, as you well know from your experience, gets firmed up quite early.
Yeah.
So, would you be comfortable with March?
My March, if that's I think that's
Councillor Fletcher.
reasonable.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. I'd like to speak when Councillor Quacks is concluded.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, I'm done. I think this is a very simple. This is a reasonably elegant solution to the whole issue of the transient position that both Panuku and the board need to have a way forward. I think this is a way that we can actually provide them with a way forward. So, I would recommend this as.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I concur that it would be very good to have some parameters around the timelines. And in moving this, in seconding this, I see this in no way as disrespectful of the process that Panuku have been involved in. I think that Panuku do really great work for us as a council, but too often in this desire, and you often hear it around the debating chamber, well, we just need courage, we just need to get on with it. Yes, agree with all of those things, but sometimes we just need common sense. And to me, this is the opportunity that we have to get Panuku to talk to the local board. It's not as if we are having a hugely polarised debate about whether or not Takapuna should have further intensification and whether it shouldn't be a metropolitan centre. Everybody agrees with that. It's just a question of how we implement this. So I think that there is the opportunity. The budgetary considerations are important, and I take on board what you've said, and I think by having a March timeline on that, these can all be taken into account. But I would like to give Clive the opportunity to just comment on the deliverability of this formally, but I hope all members can accept this as the opportunity for moving forward in an inclusive way and ensuring that we get an outcome that's really good for future residents of Takapuna.
Thank you. Clive, quick response.
Well, a quick response is the local board set out its local board's comments to the hearings panel were set out on in the attachment A today to the planning committee, and there are five points there. The fifth of which is an underground car park be constructed with a minimum of 400 car parks on the current site, and preferably is managed by Auckland Transport. That's probably a $50 million project, and you probably want to bring that back in time to think about it in your LTP refresh, because it's really? and it's a if that's what is necessary to reach a chord, then I suspect Panuku won't be able to do that.
So look, we just have to canvass that, and it would be a very unhealthy.
But Mr. Chairman, I think a shorter time frame would be better.
Yeah. Okay, shorter time frame than March?
Well, I think it's essential because...
No. This is a political decision now, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me.
Well, Mr. Chairman, the reason I make that is we've advanced, we're in the process of, and maybe we were we were optimistic in anticipating you might support the change of use, because we've started moving with Auckland Transport to work through the process to take, we're working through the procurement process to take the Gasometer car park to market. If this is not proceeding, then if this is not proceeding, then or is delayed, then we would halt that procurement work. So it'd be quite good to be clear. So I think it'd be better to target maybe trying to get a response before Christmas. I think if we could.
Okay, Councillor Quack.
Because this is not about consultation; it's about a discussion with the local board.
It's about the community.
Councillor Quacks, it is about consulting with the local board and working it out with the local board. That's your motion.
Yes.
So just while you were having a conversation then, Clive is outlining that there's a complexity with the gasometer site to the west. Clive, can you just quickly repeat that, and just so that Councillor Quacks as the mover understands that?
Yeah, so because we're trying to deliver your expectations at pace, so we've been working on the procurement for the gasometer site, which needs to be that's 2.5 years of work before you can even start contemplating building a public open space on the Anzac site, because you're going to be able to move the cars across. And if this is protracted, if this discussion, and it's only a local board discussion, that's not necessarily community engagement, or not. That is not design and community engagement on ways of planning the site, which will take a lot longer period than that. So we've really got to down tools on virtually everything while these discussions are going on. So I think we just have to get some. It's a real reconfiguration of the project. So
sorry, Councillor Quacks, you're going to say something?
Well, I think that we're already working to a tight time frame anyway. It's now the beginning of we're almost halfway through November. In a month's time, everybody packs up tools, and in local government. Till the end of January, so that we're working to an incredibly restricted time frame as it is, and I've just had a couple of quick conversations in my ear. Are you actually giving enough time? I think that March 2018, I think, is probably reasonable, and it means that people's minds are focused.
Mr. Chairman, I think in order, as the seconder, I think in order that this has integrity, while I've heard what Clive has had to say on this, I think March is probably the more credible time in terms of ensuring that there will be integrity to this process. So I think both mover and seconder would like to adhere to March.
I've heard a good account there. Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
Just something, because I think what I think's been missing is that Kate actually hasn't been able to talk about the current engagement. I mean, my understanding is that there's been meetings with Panuku by the local board many months of this year. So it's...
Kate, can you account for, give us an account of the engagement?
So that's what I'm sort of saying is that we're thinking it's going to be a 6-month process to talk to the local board, but in actual fact there's been huge engagement with the local board. Might not be agreement, but there's been engagement. So that's what I want to understand before you, because everybody's just operating off, the top of their heads without the correct information.
Kate, we'll just go to Kate and we'll ask Kate.
We did already for an hour this morning.
Kate, does Panuku actually have capacity to engage with the local board this side of Christmas?
We do, and we have a workshop or a business meeting scheduled for the early December with the local board to discuss what the outcome of today was going to be.
A workshop and a business meeting?
I'm not sure if it...
A workshop.
A workshop.
Yeah.
There is a business meeting. Mr. Chairman, it just says by March. It could come earlier.
Okay, look, we've heard it all. Members, I think we're going to just have to sit with the march. Just sit with the march, but there could be quite serious implications in this. Member Quacks, our first meeting is in February. Would you be amenable, Councillor Quacks and Fletcher, would you be amenable to February?
No.
Because that's when our...
No.
it would have to be towards the end of February anyway. Look, this is by March 2018, Mr.
By
Chairman.
March, thank you.
By March. So it could very well be February, could very well be the beginning of March.
Well pointed out. It's by March. Members, let's be a little bit ambitious about getting it back. And Panuku have said they've got capacity. Okay, members, I think we have heard a lot of contributions here. I'm going to commend this motion to be supported. Okay, so if you can please support this motion. And Panuku have said they have capacity to engage with the board now. and hopefully things can be resolved there, and we get a report back. That could be to this committee, it could be to the governing body, though I do understand the Independent Māori Statutory Board would like to continue their involvement with this project as well. So, I'd probably like to move towards closure on this. Councillor Filipaina, on the amendment.
Chair, I will be voting against this deferral. I came through with an open mind, as Councillor Casey did. After hearing everybody's talk around this particular issue, and especially yours, Chair, in regards to the consultative process that has happened way back in the North Shore days. And I thought to myself, reading 5, there's 2 issues we have to either approve or we go back and, according to 5, require the process to begin again. And it should not be. It should not be beginning again. And Chair, you know, I will be holding, and as we all do around this table, I will be holding accountable to those people after what Clive has said around the monies and the negotiations that have sort of taken place to date. I will be holding those people accountable, and as we all should, because you laid out the platform, Kate laid out the platform around the consultation with the local board. Councillor Casey actually made the point, and this is why, and it changed, was what you commented on, changed my mind from, yeah, let's defer it to no. And that we need to make a decision. And the comment was, at the election there was a new local board, and so all the discussion and consultation beforehand by the community, by the existing local board, that went by and by. See you later, alligator, because you had a new board that came in and said, no, we are totally against what is happening with Transform Manukau. $50 million, what I've just heard, no way at all am I going to vote for the $50 million for underground car park. If anything, the local board can have a look at paying the $50 million. Transform or unlock Takapuna. If you want to unlock Takapuna and we don't end up getting a decision till March, or we've lost money in regards to the negotiations, I will be holding the people accountable, as we all should. So, Chair, that's just my view. I will be calling a division, and I will not be supporting the deferral as a result of what I heard from Panuku and what I've heard around here. Thank you,
Councillor Filipaina.
That's all right.
Member Henry. Member Henry?
Just having a conference here. No, it's all right. I'll keep.
Councillor Cooper. Sorry, you wanted to close.
Well, I mean, it's not. No, it's not my. It's not your. Not my amendment. It's not my amendment. So,
Councillor Sayers, did you want to speak to your amendment?
Maybe just to help me close it, Mr. Chair. Just I'd like to just say that I'll be voting in support of the motion. That I don't believe that there needs to be any hold-up really on the work that needs to happen around the gasometer site there from Panuku. That should still be moving ahead regardless. I'm sure there's support around the table for that. And the reason, Mr. Chair, I'll be following your recommendation as well and voting in support of this motion is around the trust and confidence factor for Auckland Council. I think rushing this through today is going to leave an ill feeling and a bad taste in the community's mouth. By deferring it for a few months, we can potentially avoid that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. There's a couple of things I just wanted to follow up on. I mean, one of the issues was talked about was trust, and I addressed that in the deliberations. Absolutely, I addressed it, and it was acknowledged, and I had several emails afterwards saying thank you, because you realise there's an issue of trust. And the reason that we put those conditions on the recommendation and we've worked up the rest of these is because we wanted to make sure that what was implicit in Panuku's proposal was actually on paper. And it actually said no, and I hate to use the pejorative word flog off, but it seems to be a really popular way of getting applause. But actually, this is actually about being, putting that on paper to say, yes, we are going to do those things with the community. But I'm not prepared for Panuku to go ahead, spend a huge amount of money on designs. You know, these things cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to get designs, all those sorts of things, work with the community, all the staff are involved, and then turn around and say, no, we're not going to change the use, because some people aren't prepared to be brave enough to back up their support of our whole strategy across Auckland. And we're regional councillors, and of course we're elected locally, of course we are. And we hear what local people say. Today, we were here to support a regional strategy of transform, unlock and support. Takapuna is an unlock proposition. It's a metropolitan centre, and it's prime, it's a beautiful town, it's a beautiful city or town, and the heart of it is ugly. It's a car park. And so what we were trying to do with this was actually create that into a really space that people could be proud of. To have the market, to have, you know, even now where the Anzac commemoration is held on private land. You know, it's not secure. Jan, could you go out? Thanks. And so what it means is that unlock means there is no council money for it. We don't put money into unlock, we put money into transform. And so that means that to get any development and change, you need private investment. And that's why we were looking at that around the edges. And it was very clear, and the local board put everybody wrong this morning. It was very clear in that submission form. It said it will involve the sale, and many people brought that up in the submissions. Many people said, yes, talked about the sale. But what these recommendations talk about, including the town square. So we're saying we want public open space here, but the way we can maximise really energising and bringing more people
point of order,
to the retail,
My point of order is there is a motion. This relates to a previous motion.
Yes, and then I'm getting to why.
Well, you're taking a very long way to get to your point, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Appreciate it. Just on the amendment.
Well, the amendment and the reason. Actually, Mr. Chairman, you know, everybody else has had a really long time. They've had their more than 5 minutes, and I think it's really
tedious.
Okay, now look, this is not.
These are the sort of people we have to work with, Mr. Chairman. I'm afraid it's really not collegial.
It's all the more reason to put it, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Cooper, that was
telling
not
me
helpful
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Telling me I'm
you
tedious.
You are sorry. Thank you. I'll take that as an apology.
I would like an apology from Councillor.
Oh, that's nonsensical.
Councillors,
well,
let's close this.
Sir, I have put a procedural motion for closure.
We should walk.
I now have a procedural motion, and I must take the motion.
Well, point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
No, there is a procedural motion. I can't take any other discussion or input
it was an
while there's a
during the
procedural
debate.
motion.
She was entitled
Do you have a
to
second?
finish.
Yes.
Councillor Walker.
Councillor Walker, I must take the procedural motion.
Entitled to finish.
And I'll take the procedural motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? No.
Aye.
No. It's lost. Councillor Cooper, would you conclude, please?
Yeah. So, for me, it is very, you know, it's very difficult to defer this, but I will take your lead, Mr. Chairman. I think that at the end of the day, you know, I'd really like to see Takapuna, you know, really develop it. But if it means it's another month or so, okay. But I'm very concerned about people saying this is simple. This deferral is not simple, and we've had Panuku representatives tell us that this actually could cause quite a problem with some land negotiations. This is not simple. It's really simple to get lots of applause and, you know, say things that make people, you know, cheer for them. But the actual decision that needs to create Takapuna as it needs to be is actually got to be a brave decision. So I will support this, Mr. Chairman. I'll take your lead. I'm not happy about it because I think that people really do want a fantastic centre, and it can't happen unless we have a change of use. Thank you.
I think it's been well explored. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Division.
Aye.
I called division.
Got a division. I need to take a division.
Mr. Chairman,
Called it earlier.
Mr. Chairman, the vote
No,
has already
it's-
been taken.
No.
I will
Point of
still...
order. Called the
He said it
division
before we
early.
did
How
it.
many chairs are in this
He
meeting?
called the
Sorry,
division
Chair.
earlier. I heard it.
Just want to let Councillor Quacks know the rules.
I hadn't called it, I'm being told. Thank you,
All right.
Councillor Quacks. So there is a division.
Okay, so voting on the amendment to item 11, Councillor Darby.
4.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Councillor Cashmore.
No.
Councillor Collins.
4.
Councillor Cooper.
4.
Councillor Filipina.
Against.
Councillor Fletcher.
4.
Mayor Phil Goff.
4.
Councillor Mike Lee.
Aye.
Councillor Newman.
4.
Councillor Quacks.
4.
Councillor Sayers.
4.
Councillor Simpson. 4. Councillor Sir John Walker. 4. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
4. Let's get the votes on, and we'll declare that carried. And we'll now adjourn. We'll adjourn for lunch.
Take them accountable.
Time. Come back here at 2:45, members. On the dot.